We're going to dive into one of the oldest, most fundamental processes in all of biology. It's called glycolysis. Think of it as life's original power plant, a system that evolved billions of years ago. But what's so wild is that this ancient engine isn't just some biological relic. It is right at the heart of how we live, how we stay healthy, and even how we get sick. So have you ever really stopped to think about it? How does one single tiny molecule of sugar, glucose, power everything you do? I mean, from firing a single neuron to running a marathon. That's the big question we're going to break down today. How does life turn simple fuel into actual usable fire?
All right, it all kicks off with a universal problem that every cell has. It needs energy. And to use that energy, it needs a form of payment it can actually spend right now.
And that payment is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. The absolute best way to think about ATP is as the cell's ready cash. It's not a savings account for later. It's the actual cash in your pocket that you use to buy a coffee or pay for a bus ticket. It's the immediate, spendable energy for getting work done. So this creates a constant challenge for every single living cell out there, from a simple little bacterium to all the trillions of cells that make you, you. The challenge is this. How do you take a big fuel source like glucose, which is full of potential, and convert it into that spendable ready cash of ATP?
Well, the answer is just so elegant, and it's used by pretty much all life on Earth. It's glycolysis. This is the engine that solves that fundamental energy problem.
Whoa, okay. Now this is the full chemical blueprint for glycolysis. And I know, it looks super complicated. 10 different steps, a bunch of enzymes. But don't worry, we are not going to memorize this, I promise. We're just going to focus on the big picture, the actual logic of how this beautiful machine works. So, how does it work? Well, you can basically boil all 10 of those steps down into two main parts. First, you've got the energy investment phase. You know the saying, you got to spend money to make money? Well, the cell does exactly that. It spends a little ATP to get the glucose molecule prepped and ready. And then comes the fun part, the energy payoff phase. This is where that prepped molecule gets split apart and the cell cashes in with a net profit of energy.
So let's look at the accounting here. In phase 1, the cell makes an investment. It spends 2 molecules of its precious ATP cash to get the process started. But then, in phase 2, here comes the payoff. It generates a total of 4 ATP molecules.
So you spend 2, you make 4, which leaves a net profit of 2 ATP for every single molecule of glucose. Now that might not sound like a huge windfall, but the key here is speed. This process is incredibly fast, giving the cell a quick jolt of energy exactly when it needs it. But hold on, ATP isn't the only important thing that comes out of this. At the very end of the line, we get this really key molecule called pyruvate. And what happens next to this pyruvate? Well, that's where the story takes a really interesting turn. Because that little pyruvate molecule finds itself at a huge metabolic fork in the road. It has 3 totally different potential destinies, and the path it takes all boils down to one single critical factor. So what's it going to be for our pyruvate molecule? Well, its entire fate hangs on one simple question. Is there oxygen around or not? Okay, so path number 1. If there's plenty of oxygen, pyruvate heads into the cell's main power plants, the mitochondria. In there, it gets completely broken down, releasing a ton more energy. It's the most efficient route. But what if there's no oxygen? Like when you're sprinting and your muscles are screaming. That's path number 2, lactic acid fermentation. Pyruvate gets turned into lactate. That's the stuff that makes your muscles burn. And then there's a third path, used by organisms like yeast. It's called alcoholic fermentation. Pyruvate gets turned into ethanol and CO2. And yep, that's the very process that gives us bread and beer. Now, this ancient, fundamental pathway seems like a good thing, right? It powers life. But it has a dark side. It can be hijacked by one of our toughest diseases, turning into a dangerous addiction that fuels the runaway growth of cancer. Back in the 1920s, a scientist named Otto Warburg noticed something really strange about cancer cells. He saw that they were absolute sugar fiends. They would just gobble up massive amounts of glucose and spit out lactate, even when they had plenty of oxygen available to do things the efficient way. This bizarre behavior became known as the Warburg effect. So let's just compare the two strategies. A normal, healthy cell is like a fuel-efficient car. If oxygen's around, it'll use it to get the most mileage out of its fuel. A cancer cell, on the other hand, it basically throws fuel efficiency right out the window. It's like a gas-guzzling muscle car that's stuck in first gear with the pedal to the metal. Why would it do that? Because it's not just about energy, it's about rapidly making the building blocks it needs to grow and divide like crazy.
And this little metabolic trick has some truly devastating consequences. It gives cancer cells a massive advantage when it comes to growth. Plus, all of that lactate they're constantly pumping out makes the area around them acidic. And that acidic environment actually helps the tumor invade its neighbors and even hide from our own immune system.
But here's the really hopeful part. Understanding this addiction, this weird metabolic quirk, also gives us a brand new way to attack cancer. We can try to hack its own system by going after the very engine that's fueling it.
Which leads us to the critical question in modern medicine. Can we actually fight cancer by targeting this out-of-control sugar addiction?
The answer is a definite yes, and we're already doing it in two really big ways. First up, diagnosis. You've probably heard of PET scans, right? Well, they work by using a radioactive glucose imposter. Because cancer cells are so hungry for sugar, they just suck the stuff up, which makes the tumors light up like a Christmas tree on the scan. It shows doctors exactly where the trouble is. And then there's treatment. Scientists are designing these incredibly smart drugs that can basically jam the gears of the cancer's engine, blocking key enzymes in the glycolysis pathway. The goal is to shut the whole operation down from the inside.
So, from a simple sugar molecule to the complex fight against one of our deadliest diseases, it all comes back to this one ancient pathway. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. And it really leaves you with a final, fascinating question. Could the future of cancer therapy really be as simple as starving the tumor?